Democracy is a form of government in which the people choose their leaders by voting. It also takes into consideration everyone's opinions. Capitalism is an economic and cultural system where the means of producing and distributing goods are owned by individual people and companies rather than by the government.
Democracy and capitalism wouldn't have been possible without three important processes. There are three countries in Europe that have a significant importance for both democracy and capitalism. These countries are Great Britain, France, and Germany.
On 1789, France was the place where the people, based on the ideas of the Enlightenment, stood for themselves against conservatism and cruel monarchies. The French Revolution became the perfect example and inspiration for the world. That is how democracy became real, instead of just some unreachable and impossible dream. France was one of the countries that followed the British and American idea of capitalism. During the French Empire, Napoleon sought to introduce a continental system that would render Europe economically autonomous to promote British trade and commerce. It involved such stratagems as the use of beet sugar in preference to the cane sugar that had to be imported from the tropics. Although this caused businessmen in England to agitate for peace, the government was able to persevere, in part because the United Kingdom was well into the Industrial Revolution. This was an important event because it opened France to globalization and important trade.
France started to show a great advance on democracy during the 19th century, showing ideas like the Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen, that was probably the most important document during the period of time in Europe talking about democracy because of many reasons. First of all, the government started to think in another way to govern in order to make feel their population secure of themselves and protected. Another reason is that was consequence of a social movement caused by the population who was tired of the same people in the government. And the most important reason and fact it was that the government and the population together started to make a new model of democracy and capitalism in order to make a great nation.
The capitalist system that began in the Industrial Revolution is one of the most efficient and effective methods of production nowadays. In the decades and centuries after the Industrial Revolution, the new improved tools, machines, and the ability to increase output and efficiency have spread all around the world. Before the Industrial Revolution, agriculture was the primary form of capitalism. Small markets and farms were the base of economy. These types of commerce were ideal for supporting small communities and families, but it was the introduction of improved tools and equipment that allowed nations to create powerful economies. Besides the technological developments that were key for the development of the country during the Industrial Revolution, there was the ability to mass manufacture items such as food, clothing, and shelter, which were previously only produced on small scales and used to support individual families rather than provide a source of revenue. The expansion of capitalism during the Industrial Revolution was the beginning of the international trade and commerce. In democracy, there were the three parliamentary acts which satisfied moderate reformers than radicals. The three parliamentary acts were: First Reform Act of 1832. This act gave the vote in towns only to men who occupied property with an annual value of €10. The Second Reform Act of 1876 was described as a leap in the dark by Lord Derby, and yet only 2 in every 5 Englishmen had the vote in 1870. And the Third Reform Act of 1884, this last one enfranchised all male house owners in both urban and rural areas and added 6 million people to the voting registers. Even though by the ending of the 19th century, Britain wasn't considered an official democratic country, the three parliamentary acts were the beginning of the way towards democracy.
Germany's failure at establishing democracy from 1871 to 1945. The German nation state grew under the rules of Bismarck, that set up with all the ideologies of a new Western parliamentary state. The conflicts of German democratic movements were cultural and state implemented. Bismarck achieved to protect his royal state while the rise of the German Reich. It started in different ways and ended giving some special privileges to the middle class that were normal in other Western societies, which were very industrialized. This led to the discussion of the parliamentary democracy and their share of power. Since the nationalist movements of the post-Napoleonic Europe, they were looking for the unification, a feat that was almost impossible unless under a fast, strong leadership, which Bismarck finally provided under a high cost of indoctrinating his reactionary views first in the Constitution of North German Confederation of 1860s and finally with the revised Constitution of the German Reich. This new era of German unification made a lot of precedents that were followed by anti-democratic feelings, and the people believed of a strong leadership to help them pass through hard times. The rise of German nationalism from 1830 to 1870, the educated middle class had become important to German society. Across all 39 states, this middle class wanted more rights and freedoms. They wanted freedom of speech and that the elected parliament would represent their interests. They thought these ideas would be best realized and protected in a united Germany with a new constitution. By 1859, groups of doctors, lawyers, teachers, and businessmen formed the National Verein. This organization became a liberal party which actively campaigned for reforms such as a parliamentary election. Industrialization hardly increased in Germany. Businessmen wanted to increase the markets available for their goods to maximize profits. Most existing trade was between the 39 states, but developing this was hampered by some barriers. A single Germany without so many taxes would help trade and increase prosperity. In 1818, Prussia was the largest and the most powerful German state. By 1838, 25 other German states had joined the economic alliance. Prussia developed its own railroad networks to maximize trade opportunities. This economic cooperation was so successful it made people think of political union.
In the 19th century, capitalism and democracy played a huge role in the development of the European nations. This period of time also put an advantage to the European because they started to share new ideas and new methods in order to improve capitalism and democracy. That's why the European capitalism and democracy models are used all around the world. Because people of all around the world wanted to live these kind of freedoms that the world of democracy and capitalism can offer. And these ideas start growing in the European nations such as Germany or Great Britain.